G'day, just a quick video showing my approach to editing infrared photos. So this is one that a friend of mine's taken that I'm just going to go through my workflow on DxO and using Affinity Photo. Basically, this is the photo. I'm not going to do too much to it other than the colors. I might just straighten the horizon slightly, which is, I think it's just got a touch of a slope that way that just we can correct. See if that looks better. Might just do a little bit of a crop. Oops, sorry, wrong button, that one. Bit of a crop. And then I'll get onto the colors, which is what it's really all about. So that'll do. Now, the way that I do this in DxO, I use that for the raw processing, and then I use Affinity to do the color swapping. And basically the main thing for DxO is you can do contrast, you can do a little bit of tone correction on the tone curve if you want to, but I don't really think we need to do that on this one. We've got good contrast, some shadow, good sky, interesting rocks in the foreground. So what we'll do is basically set the white balance, and the way that I do that is try and find something neutral, and a cloud is often a good neutral object in one of these infrared photos. So it gives us some color in the sky, some color in the trees. The more blue that you've got the trees, the more red they'll be when you convert it, and likewise the more sort of goldeny red that the sky is, the more it's going to come through as blue. So as long as you've got something somewhere around about this region, so you get a little bit of variation in the clouds, but don't get your white balance sort of down here where you've got almost white trees and then a brown sky, because you're not going to get any color when you do the swap. So it's important that you've got a blueness in the trees to balance things. So that's how I sort of set up my white balance, and then you can copy and paste that onto other photos that you're processing at the same time if you need to. Bit of noise reduction, I'm just going to leave it on the normal default settings, and it does the default lens correction. So now I'll export it, and I'm going to export it into Affinity Photo as a 16-bit TIFF, and that gives us the least loss in any pixel information when it goes across. So we'll do that. Should be pretty quick, hopefully. Yep, and here we are. Now, my process for doing the color swap in Affinity, I basically just do it as a couple of layers. So if you add in a new adjustment layer and then go to the channel mixer, which is not something that I've used much before I got into infrared, you've got, what we're trying to do is a red and blue channel swap. So we go to the red channel, make the red negative, and make the blue positive. You start getting that candy pink into the trees. We'll go to the blue, and we'll do the same, make the blue negative, make the red positive, and somewhere around here, depends on how far you go, you'll find a bit of a balance that gives you a blue sky. You might have to go back and forth a few times to try and get to the setting that you like. Maybe don't make the red as negative on the red channel, and you'll find that you end up sometimes adding a little bit of green to it, sometimes a little bit less blue. You'll find that somewhere there you'll end up with a color balance that looks how you would have been envisaging it in some of those Kodak film infrared photos that you see from back in the day. The green channel you can also fiddle with. That seems to have fairly significant tonal changes in the image for which parts are what. So you don't want to go too aggressive with the green channel. But sometimes by fiddling with the green channel, it allows you to change the other channels a bit more to get, for example, more red into an area. I've gone the wrong way there. So you can get more color into different areas. But I'm not really happy with what I've done on the green channel, so I'm just going to reset that to where it belongs. And we'll go back to where we were with the red and the blue channels. Now, it doesn't always give you the colouring that you want. Often, depending on the infrared filter that you've used, you might find that it looks a bit washed out or desaturated. And look, the thing that I think that you've got to balance is it often depends on the filter that you've used as to how much light it lets through, because if you've used a filter that blocks a lot of visible light, there's not that much color information to come through. So you're battling yourself trying to get the color that's not really there in the first place. So that's not bad. It's still a little bit light in the trees. So I can try bringing some of the blues down a bit, because that was the main color where the blues come from. Where the trees have got color in them. So that might be a little bit less saturated there, but it's a bit difficult to get your balance right. And sometimes just resting your eyes and having another look at it is what you need to do to try and sort of readjust. To readjust to the picture that you're trying to create. And this is often quite a bit of trial and error to get to what you want. So still getting a bit more green in that sky than I'd like, but we're getting there with the colours. Not quite, it's making it worse. And once you've found what works for one photo, you can actually apply it to multiple photos, so you don't have to go through this process for every single photo that you take. That's getting there. Might have been a bit too aggressive on the green reduction. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty close. So I ended up with basically on the red channel minus 95% for red and nearly double that for the blue. And on the blue channel, which is the swap, so I haven't quite done a full swap. We've got a lot of red on the blue channel, a little bit of negative in the blue, and I haven't touched the green on either of those. And then on the green channel, basically I've turned the green down from 100%, which was really weird and washed out. I've just backed that down to a level that looks reasonably neutral in the context of the photo. So often the green sort of has this weird cyan effect. And I suppose if you think about the color wheel, I'm not an expert on the color wheel, but I reckon it's probably the opposite of the green might be going into the cyans. Going into the magentas. Cyan's the wrong color. Anyway, so I'm going to leave it there because I'm reasonably happy with that. Next thing that I do is just the usual basic things. So a curves layer just to try and even out the tone across the photo. So I'll make it a bit brighter to bring the clouds up. Looking at my histogram, it's quite a lot brighter. The other thing you can do is if you can clearly see that you need to basically start your tonal range there, then you can just drag that takeoff point, and it's brought my histogram up. So now I've got this nice area of highlights that are all red, which is all of the trees, and then the rest of it in the shadows comes through a bit more nicely. And what I can do is I can just add a little bit of an S curve to this, so we can just darken the shadows slightly. And that gives me this nice dark black down here. This shadow in here is a little bit saturated as well. So I'm going to just apply, I might get rid of that. And what I'm going to do, so I'll leave that, is I'm going to do another curves layer, which I'm going to apply a filter to. So new curves layer. And there's lots of ways you can do this, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to make it look about right in that shadow there. And the other thing that I need to do is, with your curves layer, you can adjust it for different colors. So you can actually go to the reds. If I move that, then I can actually make the reds in the shadows less prominent. So I can do that, and I can go to the greens in the shadows and bring them down slightly. Maybe not the greens. Maybe we'll just do the reds, and I might just do it as a bit of a curve like that. And I'm going to make it more extreme than I'd like, because when I put a mask on, I'm going to just brush this in subtly in the area that I want. So I've got my curves adjustment here. I could name it, but I'm too lazy. Now this button here is the mask layer button. If you're not using Affinity, if you're using Photo, it might be somewhere else, but the mask layer button here now has put a mask on here, and it's all white, which is no good, because that means if it's white, it's applying that mask with 100% opacity, so it's 100% in effect. What I'm going to do is just clear the mask, so right click on it, and I'm going to clear it. So now it's all black, and you can see that if I hide the layer, it does nothing. What I then like to do is go over to my brush tool, and I just pick a reasonably big brush. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger. So something like that. The opacity, just make sure it's nice and low flow, low opacity, because you want to be able to build this layer in. It needs to be a bit bigger actually. And so what I'm going to do, too big. So what I'm going to do now is, on my layer here, I'm just going to pick my color as white, and then I'm just going to paint this in until it just takes the edges off that I want in this area here. And you can see that's not doing much, but I'm just going to paint that in a little bit more here. And because the layer is only affecting the shadows and we're only drawing it in on the shadows, it shouldn't be too obvious. Now if we mask that, get rid of it, you can see it's just taken some of that glow out of that shadow area just to give it a little bit more balanced contrast. So I'm happy with that. That's all I need to do there. Next thing, there's always, how far do you want to go? Do you want to boost contrast or whatever in various places? I'm just going to leave it as it is, because this is not really a video about boosting contrast or anything like that. And really, that's the main set of edits in terms of the color adjustment. There's other tools that you could use if you're more comfortable. So you could put a hue, saturation, luminance layer on here, which gives you a little bit, at this stage now that we've got those curves how we want it, if you put on the HSL adjustment layer, this is sometimes handy now at this point, because you can go to the reds and you can just change the saturation a little bit just in the reds that we've put on. So it might be good to increase the saturation just a little bit, so 15%, and drop the luminosity slightly if they're a little bit too aggressive, and this will sort of make them more of a rich, deeper sort of color. And you might find also that just changing the hue slightly gets you more to the color you want at this point. So you can make it very almost pink, or you can go all the way to golden, but somewhere about where we had it before is about right. So I'm just going to pretty much leave it where it was, because I feel like we got that pretty close to how I'd imagined this picture. The other thing is the sky. Sometimes the sky doesn't always end up the color that you want, so you can use the color picker to pick the color of the sky that you want. When you've got the blues selected, it then adjusts. So if I go to the picker again and pick down here, it makes that color a different one, so I can go back to the blues that I want. Find an area that's about representative. And then at this point now, we can change that color in the sky, but you do want to be a little bit careful about how how far you move it, because you can make it affect a wider range of colors by dragging these dots, or a narrower range of colors, but you will start to see artifacts if you make it too extreme, which is why I prefer to do all of my color adjustments using the channels rather than using the HSL. If you try doing the HSL adjustment, you often end up with some quite extreme color shifts and weird edges. So it's much easier to do it with the channels rather than trying to make your color swap using HSL. And that's my process basically. Feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions, or if you do it differently, I'd love to hear about it.